Hey guys, it's Vince. Today in this video, we are going to be covering many different topics, but what I wanted to do is go over touching base with a potential client on Facebook Marketplace. I was contacted. He found a system he wanted me to look at. And of course, after setting up a consultation, I want to give you the feedback. So once again, everyone can share in the information because I'm telling you guys right now it's the Wild West of these vendors releasing systems, and most of them are unscrupulous to the fact they may or may not understand what they are building. Let's go over this real quick. You can see here I have this system image inside of my AI software, and the reason I did that is so we can blow it up and we can manipulate this picture so we can see exactly what's going on here. Now, naturally, as I zoom in, you can see text can get blurry, things can get blurry, but we can see the main detail of the system, and this is very important. Once again, this particular vendor is assuming he's building himself a gaming PC to some degree because we've got the Lexan cover over the front of the controller's enclosure. And of course, in doing so, it's great because it allows us to validate, is this controller built correctly? We can see right here, he's using the trusty about $30 USB breakout board, which once again, USB, Universal Serial Bus, has been determined as unstable for use with CNC robots. And the main reason that is because Universal Serial Bus is a very, very susceptible signal dealing with ground issues, EMI, and voltage spikes. Now, I am not the only one saying this. I'm delivering this message direct utilizing Balzis, who once again is lead engineer at the CNC drive. And once again, you can see the email. I'm going to place it on screen. I've actually covered this many times. And you can see in this email, he's covering the exact problems of what you will experience with USB on many of the systems being produced. Now, as we look at this system, we see a lot of things going on here. First and foremost, we see that our cables are coming in using glands. And just so everyone can see, right here, we see at the top these glands that are being used so that the cables come directly in and get wired directly to the drives. Now, mainly that's to save the vendor labor. The problem with this, of course, is that then the cables are under direct stress, and I can tell you right now, none of these cables are double shielded. And we also do not see any shields being allocated to a ground bus within this system. And you can see that right here, there is absolutely no ground bus within the system. That being said, as we come over here and we look at the VFD, we can zoom in, and once again, we do not see any proper double shielded cable being used, which all VFDs should be incorporating to once again mitigate EMI, which of course these units generate the most of because they draw the most amps. So looking at this system, I want to now clarify the price because this is where things get interesting. This vendor wants for this system $8,500. Okay, $8,500 for the whole system. He's trying to make it a package deal, like so many of them do. They include Mach 3, they include CAM software. In this case, it's a Vectric piece of CAM software. And then, of course, they throw in a computer, and they throw in the chassis, and they'll tell you things about the chassis, which they're proud of. But what's really interesting is when we look at the controller, that's always where most of the problems lie because you can't hack a controller. It's got to be built correctly or you're SOL. You can play off like many contractors do, and we all know they exist, where they'll say, hey, I'm going to go in your house and I'll drywall or I'll paint or I'll do, different types of genres of contracting, and they think they can pull it off. Unfortunately, with this, it takes more attention to detail to really get an understanding of what you're working with because there's a lot of things we're working with when we're dealing with this level of electronics. We're dealing with lots of EMI, we're dealing with lots of grounding issues, and I can tell you right now, when you do not see a ground bus installed in any controller, you already know there is a problem. Now, it's more prevalent when we're dealing with an IDS system, also known as individual drive system, which we see here. We have 4 drives. They're each independently wired. And when they're independently wired, that means that there's a lot more cabling going on, there's a lot more labor going on, and what these vendors fail to understand is that wiring a drive from point A to point B and making general connections does not mean the system is built to provide stable operation. That is only achievable when all details are covered. And that is why, as an engineer, I'm covering all of those details. And I can tell you right now, I don't know how many of these units have been sold, but if they have been sold, it's scary to think how many people are getting burned when they're dropping the kind of money that this person is asking for. And the thing that still baffles me is they seem to build a decent chassis like so many other vendors, but they fail to just sell the chassis. They always feel it necessary to incorporate the controller. Now, why is that? Well, the truth of the matter is it's because the controller yields the most amount of profit when bundled with the chassis. And this is fact. Unfortunately, they do not know how to build the controller. And I don't know why we keep seeing this other than they see the potential to essentially sell to people who don't know what they're looking at. That's where I come in. More and more clients, whether they be potential clients, whether they be past clients, whether they be my current clients, are pointing these systems out, and I'm hopefully reaching you before you spend your hard-earned money to do at least one thing, and that's ask questions. Because there's no one in this field that is doing this, and the scariest part of all is there's a lot of people right now in tough times looking for a way to separate themselves by starting a business that are getting burned, because nothing sucks worse than investing in a robot for production so that you can start hopefully living the lifestyle you plan on doing and getting burned with the fact that it performs like a paperweight, meaning that you're creating blems because you're expecting the robot to just be able to produce what you want because you purchased it, and unfortunately it's not stable. So I'm telling you right now, whether you like my channel, don't like my channel, and the only ones at this point that I feel really have a problem with the channel are the ones that are like this vendor. They don't want to be called out. They're hoping that they'll fly under the radar. And it's scary to think how many people are susceptible because they don't understand robotics at the level they should. They're just looking for a business model to get started. They see a US vendor, they want to stay in the country, they see these guys offering good prices, and then they buy the system and they get burned. So I'm telling you guys, be careful. One detail that is not covered with these level of robotics, and you will have the potential for an unstable robot. Think about it like this. He didn't use double shielded cable anywhere in this bill. That is a definitive source of EMI because once again, if we don't ground, even if they use single shielded cable, which a lot of these vendors will do because it's cheaper, and they don't take the time to properly ground the shield drain because they don't understand it, guess what? The cable is not then shielded. So that means that EMI, once again, is still prevalent on top of the fact it could actually still generate noise for ground loops and ground interference. This is fact. You can read it online yourself. And I'm telling you this. These are the details that burn everybody at one point or another as they're getting involved with this genre and think all I have to do is buy the system and I'm home free. It's not that easy, guys. It's not. Buy from a reputable vendor. You'll pay more, but you'll get what you pay for, not just with the proper build, but with support. That being said, I wanted to show you now where we are right now with Singeth. And just so everybody is aware, Singeth is my direct contact as an engineer slash scientist at Hesperos. Now, I did the video dealing with the chassis that I built for them. And what I wanted to do is do a follow-up as far as how he's doing because he did require some more components. We're getting that taken care of. And on top of that, we were discussing how long it took him to actually go through and assemble the system. So you can see right here, and this is direct from his email, which I love because there are still guys out there who may be skeptical. You can see this is directly from him, and it says this is to give you an idea of how things are processing. Now let's look And once again, you can see my controller here as far as the enclosure, and you can see all of these GX16s came to him pre-wired. Now as we zoom in, you can see the 2 ground buses he has allocated, once again using DIN rail mounts in the enclosure we designed. You can see here he's got his AC power distribution right here. Once again using DIN rail mounts, you can see the DIN rail mounts right there. And then he's got his Raptor drives. And then he's got a controller here and remaining accessories. So we've got fan mounts. Everything here is simplified for general building. And looking at this in a general assembly, you are streamlining a build process that would take an inordinate amount of time. And just to prove that point, I asked him, I said, essentially, how long would this build take? And he wrote here, the mock-up just took me less than 3 hours. That was also because mounting the gecko drives took some time because of bolt underneath, aligning it with a nut. Makes total sense. I said, wow, that's awesome to get it done considering it's your first unit too. And then over here, he said to me, if I had to solder the GX16 terminal connections, it would have taken days. Now, I want you to think about that. And this is the best visual representation coming once again from a past corporate client of what you're dealing with. He doesn't have to worry about shielding. He doesn't have to worry about anything except grounding his shield drains, once again, to the ground buses, which you can see now mounted within the enclosure that I've designed with him. And you can see he's already got the proper ferrites installed for passive filtration on all his connections. But the thing is, see, there is no way to fake this. You have to understand what you're working with to generate something of this caliber. And that's exactly why Singh reached out to me. That should be definitive proof. We're not dealing here with an uneducated individual. He wanted to hit the ground running like many of you, and he wanted to save time and money by them doing it themselves. They had a projected idea of what they wanted, and you can see exactly how it's coming to fruition. And what's really interesting is now he just reaches out and says, hey, Vin, I need to order another power splitter for signals. We just worked on that. So now he's getting a power splitter for signals. And at that point, that's it. He does the final wiring. Everybody is happy. He saved money on labor. He also learned to build his own system in a streamlined format. And this is the way it should be done. He doesn't have to worry about dealing with problems with interference because every base has been covered. The only responsibility he has is to attach his shield drains from all his ground leads on these GX16 connectors, which are indicated by being green, and just connect them to one of the 2 ground buses within the system. Now, again, the enclosure is, of course, metal. It is dipped in a conductive EMI coating, so once again, we lower resistance to ground, and all he has to do, being that these ground buses are mounted the way they are, is attach everything to there as far as the connections for ground, and they will dissipate properly to the chassis. So looking at this, this defines exactly how easy it is and what an end user has experienced in a corporate setting. These are emails direct from him. And when you guys read that the mock-up took him just less than 3 hours with all of this work being done, think about what that means to you. Think about what that means to you if it takes him 3 hours with a team of scientists and at his disposal to help him or mitigate, dealing with one person doing this at a much, much slower pace, what that means to you in your build. Okay? And then you read here, if I had to solder the GX16 terminal connections, it would have taken days. Now, mind you, he's just talking about these connections. What about drilling all the holes and doing the machining? Okay, think about that. If it would have taken days just to do the soldering on all those, what about all of the machining? That would have to be at least another day. Day and a half. Easy. Okay, so looking at this, there are alternatives to taking your system to the next level. I cannot emphasize that enough. The question is how do you want to achieve success? You can achieve success by going out, buying what you think looks good because of the price, and these people are right there waiting to take your money. and they are knowing the fact that you're most likely uneducated to how these systems should be built because they're uneducated to how these systems should be built. And therefore, they take your money and then you're stuck with a system that now you have to retrofit to make correct. And I say this all the time. If you don't have the money to do it right from someone who is validated, who has social validation, professional validation. I mean, again, I can only speak for myself, but my resume is directly online with over 450 videos. Think about that in the amount of time. Think about perfect eBay feedback. Think about the logic behind all of that. What is the culmination of that? How many years is that? Think of the soldering videos. Think of every video that you can think of with CNC. Do a search on my channel under the YouTube search bar and you will find it for yourself. The validation is there, guys. The question is the dollar amount associated with the quality of work you're getting able to be achieved with your budget? And if it's not, I tell you all the same thing. Save or use debt properly. And when I say use debt properly, if you're starting a business, remember anything you purchase for a business is a tax write-off, number one. Okay, number two, look at the payment you're looking at. If you're dropping 8K, 9K for a system to do it right, sometimes 5K, depending on the size of the chassis with controller and everything, or buying a Chinese chassis and retrofitting it, be realistic. If you look at that payment, it's not a lot if you have relatively decent credit to make that payment and make products immediately knowing that the equipment you have is ready to start producing because it's stable. Think about that. What is that worth for that peace of mind? I have clients that are using my systems 10 years after they bought them from me. And you think about that in the fact that this technology really hasn't changed much. If you look at my store, I'm still selling the same controllers I was selling 10 years ago. That should wake you up because realistically, if the technology was so great and so advanced, servos have been around forever. They're just highlighting it now more so because they feel that the prices on the technology are going down. But guess what? And this is the argument I bring up to anybody looking to get involved in this genre. And that is, number one, Hesperos is using steppers to work with human tissue. I want you to think about that. So they're using that as a baseline for their operation. And this is a corporate foundation in medical research, in AI. So if they're able to do that, what are you able to do when it comes to your woodworking projects, your aluminum projects, your steel projects? Think about that. Are you telling me that a circle at 2 inches cut with a stepper is worth less than somebody cutting it with a servo? It's ridiculous. Makes no sense. You don't want to get into a pissing match to say that you have a servo to be listed on YouTube unless you're a YouTube content creator and your entire realm of existence is based around, I have a better system than you. I say it's not who has the better system, it's who can produce the most with the least amount of money. They will win the race. Because when it comes to ROI, that's what matters. I could care less what motor you're using, and you should too. You want a system that's stable, that's accurate, and that will replicate what you want when you want and be stable in a sense that the consistency is always there. That's what makes a professional machine, not the size. No different than a hobby machine is only a hobby machine in terms of the person using it. That's what their outlook is. Hesperos can use this machine to do absolutely nothing except cut out widgets that they don't ever plan on using if that's what they decide. They can also use it to do what they've intended to do, and believe you me, no company of this size would invest in this equipment if it did not in some way benefit their financial well-being. So think about what I'm saying to you. It's fact. Okay, Elon Musk doesn't update his factories just to update factories. Engineers don't do that. They look at where the money is. And the money is, if I can cut a 2-inch circle with the same component or build something to cut a 2-inch circle with the same component, and it's cheaper than, say, using the latest technology that they proclaim that it's somehow better or faster, It's only going to benefit you if that speed actually makes you more money. If it doesn't, and I've never had a client ever tell me, well, you know what, speed is holding me back. I've never had clients tell me that even with systems that are from overseas. They never usually say speed is holding me back. No. What we hear is accuracy, consistency, stability issues. That's what we hear. And that's fact. Oh, I was cutting yesterday, everything was great, but today it sucks. I can't get it stable. I can't do this. But that works okay, but then it doesn't. Or my z-axis drops and then it doesn't. And when we think about that, I really want you guys to think about what I'm telling you, because this clients pay for. They pay for me to consult to them for this reason, because the ones that trust me and listen, they never come back. This client bought this chassis and now he has this chassis, and you could see where he is in getting it assembled. It went from idea to physical component within 2 weeks. Think about that. Another case in point. Here is a client dealing with a fix for their limp spindle. And how comical this sounds. It happens on many, many systems. And he wrote to me and said, I thought you might like this. Although I'm not an expert, adding a gas strut to fix the limp spindle issue seems like the proverbial Band-Aid solution, no? Let's look at what he's talking about. So let's look here. This is $1,200, once again, from one of these Class A vendors that provides you an 80 millimeter VFD spindle, 220 volt. And as we click over, we can see it includes a gas shock. And I'm not making this up. It actually includes a gas shock similar to what you'd find on a car's hood or a car's trunk lid, mainly because they understand that end users are having problems with their spindle being too heavy for the z-axis, like so many end users find, and therefore the z-axis falls. So what should they have done? They should have rectified their robot by releasing a revision with a motor with a brake. And what is a motor with a brake used for? Well, you know, or you should know, I've already designed a 600 ounce NEMA 23 motor that has an integrated brake at 24 volts. And how the brake works is it simply becomes active when no voltage is present. So when power is released, meaning power once again is cut from the controller, the brake becomes active and therefore your z-axis does not fall. This is done through proper engineering and done through, once again, understanding the problem exists. We rectify with the correct way to do it, which once again is integration into the motor, and therefore you do not have to incorporate these Band-Aid fixes of a gas strut, which again, some of these issues that are incorporated in some of these systems that are released are so comical they have to be seen to be believed. And to me, it's kind of a disgrace overall that end users who have already purchased this system, now they're looking at this instead of once again offering the correct solution, which would be a motor with a brake. And why do they do that, guys? Because I get questions all the time. Why do I think they do that? They do it because they don't want to redesign a controller coming from overseas because it'll affect their profit margins. Fact. That's a fact. And I'm telling you, be careful. The more we see videos like this, it should be eye-opening to all of you who are on the market to get involved with CNC production robotics. Once again, the genre is essentially taking over in the physical sense of AI. Any of you know that. That's why these vendors are coming out of the woodwork. Many of them have been there for years. They start tweaking their systems. We're seeing it all over the place. They got new this, new that. They self-proclaim themselves as experts, and yet we see gas struts being used on a z-axis. You be the judge. You decide what's best for your system. I know if it was me, many of you are saying, why would I pay $1,200 for a gas strut that I could buy from AutoZone? Does that sound logical? I mean, how many robots do you see? Do you see Haas incorporating a gas strut? And I know I have guys out there going, well, you're not buying a Haas robot when you're buying these systems. Okay, that's true. But shouldn't you be buying the engineering that is logical? I mean, that's the whole premise behind where you're spending your money. You want a robot to do what you want it to do with engineering that proves it's a real robot. It's not some guy sitting in his basement saying, hey, I can fix this with a band-aid and we could do it for 20 bucks because incorporating the right fix is going to cost re-engineering time. And again, we have to then send all the plans over to China, hope that the quality is inspected, hope everything functions as it does, do recalibration testing to make sure the robot is functional. It costs too much time, too much money, and to be quite honest, they're incompetent. That's the truth. No one would sell something like this. And then to sell it at 1,200 bucks, you guys be the judge. We know everything is going up right now as far as inflation. To look at this is comical to me. To me, it's comical. I don't know how many of you feel, but I can tell you right now, I am not installing on a robot Z-axis a gas strut simply because they don't want to do it correctly. And to support companies like this, I really feel for you guys. So I'm telling you now, this video is done to hopefully once again wake you guys up. You've seen my CNC fail video series, 26 videos. That's 26 weeks of videos, consistent videos of failures on YouTube content creators. And yet we also show now vendors do the same thing. These are the people that are selling these projects, and that's what I call them, projects, because that's all they are to you, in the hopes that you'll just spend the money because there's nothing on the market in a finished format. So to them, it makes more sense. Hey, we'll present it. If it sells, great. And if it doesn't, oh well. But looking at this, pretty comical. And then, of course, they try to bundle everything with it. Here, they try to make their VFD look pretty in a case. And then they'll give you the spindle mount. And then they give you the dust collector. But it's where everything starts being dissected that we see problems. And when we see cables, that's one area we always know is overlooked. Because I can tell you right now, looking at this cable, looking at the Molex connector being used, which once again, Molex connectors should never, ever, ever be used on a three-phase power cable. This is fact, guys. It's fact. This is terrifying. And then to see no shield drain coming out, we see nothing coming out of this cable at all to indicate that grounding is done properly on the end it should be. So these are things we have to think about. We have to look at this in a format that makes sense. And when we see this, we can see there are definitive problems. And I say this overall because when one base is not covered, we see definitively other bases are not covered. Corners are cut all the time. And I'm telling you that. And that's exactly why we see cables like this bundled with a system with, once again, a gas shock. I mean, there is no other way to explain this. You can see it right there, gas strut kit. And of course, they try to act as if they're bundling all these components together. It's a great price. It's not, guys. Be careful, spend wisely, and if you do anything at all, I'm telling you, always spend on a charge. Do not pay these people without some sort of buyer protection, because in the event something occurs, you guys will never get your money back. And I'm telling you right now, I have dealt with so many past clients that tell me the same thing. It's fact. So be very careful and watch what you're doing when you make your investments. All right, guys, I want to discuss this message that I actually received as I was shooting this video, which once again is a follow-up to the client I showed you dealing with the gas strut issue from a vendor he purchased a system from to correct the Z-axis from dropping. He decided to message them after we spoke and wanted to ask them about using a brake on the Z-axis. And it's interesting. We're going to read what their response is. So it says, hi, so-and-so. The amp requirement shouldn't really matter as the controller simply outputs as much as it can, and a stepper motor cannot request or pull more power than the motor drivers can pump out. That's true. That's absolutely fact. The bigger issue would be how you would power the brake. Now, guys, and I cannot tell you how often this happens. Why would that be an issue that your end user would have to take on? It should be an issue that their engineering team took on before releasing the chassis for sale. You wouldn't put that requirement on the end user. You should say, well, you know what? You came up with a great idea. They really should be thanking them. And he says, I would recommend not trying to tap power off the LED output as it's meant to be a low current connection. And I have to give you the standard warning that modifications to the controller would void the electronics warranty. Very, very, very interesting. So let me get this straight, and I'm hoping this is exactly the conclusion he came up with. For me correcting an issue you built into the system and continue to release the system, you're telling me you're going to void my warranty. Not only that, you're not even giving me a projection of how to correct the issue that you built in, or even telling me I came up with a great idea of using a motor with a brake, which obviously they've admitted that they know the brakes exist because he just expressed everything about how it would be powered. So if it didn't exist, he would have said, well, something like that doesn't exist. So what we know is essentially they know the brake exists. They basically are saying, hey, you're on your own if you want to correct this issue. Now, I cannot emphasize how much of a coincidence it is that he sent me this message literally as I'm about to upload this video. And it really shows you just what you're dealing with these vendors. I cannot tell you guys that enough. Be careful where you spend your money. Thank you all for your support. Take care.